can tell you that I'm Anne-Marie Wildman. I'm the Executive Director with the Ding-Darling Wildlife Society. And for those of you who don't know what the Society does, we are the non-profit friends group, and we support the refuge in so many different ways. As you're probably aware, the funding for the government is way, way down, and the visitor numbers, and hopefully again soon, were way, way up before the hurricane. So that makes a huge gap in important things such as land preservation, in education, in biology. We helped fund a biologist that they probably wouldn't have without this. Certainly we sent our WOW, which is our Wildlife on Wheel, our mobile classroom, out to the various areas of Fort Myers that some kids don't even get to see a beach, if you can believe it. And we educated over 10,000 different people in the various venues that they went to. Another 4,000 kids come to these by school bus each year to experience the refuge in person. So all of these things and many, many more things are funded by all of you sitting in the audience, in your time, your donations, and everything that you do, but we greatly appreciate that. A special thank you today to the people who sponsored James Currie, because this has been an overwhelming success. We've had nothing but fun all day. We won't tell Richard Crossley, who was our speaker last week, and his dearest friend. They're having a rivalry about who's the most fun. And right now you're winning, James. We'll tell Richard that. But special thank you to our sponsors. And our sponsors include Hank and Linda Spire, Jackie Aleandri, who works in our nature store, Haley Ward Inc., Environmental Engineers, and Hightower Investment Advisors. So thank you. A big round of applause for them, because without that, we couldn't do it. So thank you for that. We're going to show a short video, then I'll give a very short introduction to James, who has everything covered, as you'll see. I sat through the lecture this morning. It was amazing, and he's going to whiz you again.
The J.N. Ding-Darling National Wildlife Refuge of today isn't here by chance. In the early 1940s, J. Norwood Darling, for whom the refuge is now named, was instrumental in the effort to block the sale of environmentally valuable land to developers. Ultimately, at his urging, President Harry S. Truman signed an executive order creating this refuge in 1945. In 1982, the Ding-Darling Wildlife Society Friends of the Refuge began. Its purpose was to educate visitors about the importance of protecting lands, waters, and wildlife. In 1999, this group of volunteers stepped up to lead the building of the refuge's Visitor and Education Center. This was the first partnership of its kind, where a friends group raised money to construct a federal building. And it is still the hub of the refuge today. Why was this necessary? And what is the Society's role today? Well, over the decades, the refuge budget has been cut 60%, and it has half the staff it formerly did. Meanwhile, visitors have increased 66% to nearly 1 million people annually. The refuge cannot meet their growing needs alone. So the Ding-Darling Wildlife Society works to fill in the gaps where federal funding falls short. Most importantly, the refuge keeps Ding-Darling's spirit alive by educating generation after generation about the importance of conservation, so visitors from around the world will take that knowledge back to the communities where they live. Today, with the help of generous donors, the Society supports the refuge in these primary areas: land acquisition and restoration, advocacy, conservation education, wildlife protection, biology and water quality research, and internships.
What really draws people to Sanibel, and the core objective of people, is to come and enjoy the J.N. Ding-Darling National Wildlife Refuge. I think Ding Darling would just be ecstatic over the fact that there are people that are carrying on his legacy. I mean, he obviously gave from his pocketbook, gave from his heart, but he would be ever so gratified to know that that legacy that he started continues today.
The best legacies are not what you do for yourself today, but what you do for the next generation.
I wanted to be at the refuge because there were things that I could do here. Every time I come to volunteer, I see the important work that's being done by the Ding Darling Wildlife Society. I see the smile on children's faces and families who are enjoying nature and wildlife. It is so wonderful, it really is, to know that all of this work will be protected for the next generation because of the work that the Society has accomplished. Because if we don't do it, who will? Who will do it?
To that end, the Ding Darling Wildlife Society is dedicated to ensuring that Ding's legacy lives on at the JN Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. We invite you to join us and our thousands of members in supporting the refuge for generations to come.
You're in for a treat today. James Currie is an amazing gentleman who is very passionate about what he does. As you'll hear in his lecture, and I don't want to give too much away and repeat what he's saying, but he grew up in Cape Town and started from a very young age learning about the importance of conservation, wildlife, birding, and just all the entire world around us. He's traveled all over the United States and all over the world, as a matter of fact, for birding and wildlife expeditions. As he just mentioned to you, we're putting together a little safari sometime in the next year and a half. That will be a very private, very intimate, 5 couples tops that will have the privilege of going on a safari into in a private event. So that will be fun. And he's just an amazing, talented man. He has contributed to many publications. He's an author of a book, or several books actually, but the newest book is When Eagles Roar. It's available in our bookstore. He will be doing book signings right afterwards. He's also been the host of numerous TV shows. And with that, I'll turn the microphone over to him and let him tell you a little bit more.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. It's wonderful to be back here at Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. I've had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time here. In fact, Ding Darling was one of the first locations of our long-standing TV show, Nikon's Birding Adventures, which began right here in 2008 at Ding Darling. So great to be back here, and great to see the resilience of this community actually after the hurricane and how everything's come back, and looking at this beautiful facility and what a great job they've done. So I guess together we're better, right? And really great to see things returning back somewhat to normal. All right, let me begin with, I think, is my presentation on? Let me just see. Oh, okay, the old login. Hold on a sec, I'll get there. There we go. So, as Anne-Marie pointed out, I'll just give you a little bit brief introduction to me and sort of my early life. The focus of this talk is not on our TV shows and the work we've done with National Geographic and other networks, but more about what led up to that. I always find, and I hope you do as well, the genesis of of individuals that get into conservation work, like many of us are involved in, is sometimes as interesting as the work that they do later. So I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and I was very privileged to spend most of my formative years in a beautiful location in Cape Town called Kirstenbosch Botanical Gardens, and there are national botanical gardens in South Africa. Really beautiful, but very different to botanical gardens elsewhere in the world because there's no fences. So you can go into those gardens and you can enjoy the beautiful scenery and all the vegetation and the trees and the flowers and the birds. And then you can actually go right up Table Mountain, which is one of the most scenic mountains in the world, and walk, if you want to, the entire day all the way across from the National Botanical Gardens, all the way across to the cable car at the top, and take that cable car down. So it's really stunning. So as a young boy, my parents owned the restaurant in the Botanical Gardens, and I had the gardens to myself every single day from 6, because we would get there early because we'd have to prepare the breakfast, etc. And the gates only opened at 9 in those days. So I would have 3 hours and have this entire place to myself. It was my playground. And I remember my mother always used to say to me, James, you stick to the gardens. Whatever you do not go up that mountain. People die on that mountain every day. So that's fine, and I listened to her for a good couple of months, maybe even a year, I can't remember. I was about 8 or 9 when that started, and I had a little old Ricoh camera, those old film cameras. I don't know whether you remember those in those days, of course we all do. And I used to love going out there and photographing wildlife and birds and whatever else I could find. I remember one morning heading out there and enjoying the gardens, and then I came to this little trail which had a sign on it. And the sign said Skeleton Gorge with an arrow pointing upwards. And of course, the left side of my brain is, I can hear my mother's voice going, whatever you do not, you know. But the other side of my brain, the little devil side of my brain is going, you're a 10-year-old boy, Skeleton Gorge. I mean, come on, what's up there? Let's go find some skeletons. So I ventured up this path, and it was early morning, and spent about an hour going through this beautiful, stunning, dappled sunlight forest on the lower edges until I got really high up on the mountain. And I found this tiny little path that was kind of just very narrow with a long drop-off below it, like a cliff. And of course I'm thinking, maybe this is where the skeletons are. So I start inching my way, and I'm feeling along this granite rock face, looking at all the moss and the lichen as I'm moving across, and trying not to look below because there's like a 200-foot drop straight beneath me. And I'm winding my way around that, and this little path opens up into this beautiful amphitheater. And I'm just blown away by what I'm seeing, because right in front of me is the Cape Flats, and I'm probably close to a kilometer above sea level. And I'm looking out, and I can see the beautiful Hottentots Holland mountain range in the distance. And it's a stunning, clear morning. And I can see the Indian Ocean of False Bay to my right, and the beautiful city to my left, the city bowl of Cape Town. And right before me, perched on these little granite boulders, are dassies. And this is our South African word for an animal called a rock hyrax. And they basically look like little rabbits. They're brown in color. But funny enough, they are not related to rabbits or closely related to rodents. They're actually more closely related to, believe it or not, elephants, which I'm going to talk about later in this lecture. And I'm watching these furry little creatures sitting on the rocks, sunbathing, enjoying the morning light. And I'm in this perfect amphitheater, and they're probably about 20 feet from me. When the solitude and the beauty of the morning is broken abruptly by a dark shape flying in from the right that catches my eye. and it's a massive, huge black eagle, which is now called a Vero's eagle, the new name. And it swoops in from the right, and all these dassies start scurrying for the rock crevices. And they're making alarm calls to sound the alarm for all of them, and they all disappear into the rock crevices, all but one rather portly dassie that gets stuck in a rock crevice. And I remember it's like slow motion to me, and it's so imprinted in my brain as this majestic black eagle came down with its bright yellow feet and its black talons the size of a grizzly bear's claws. And it effortlessly just picked up this dassie, flew off from literally, you didn't see me because I was in this amphitheater and just sitting next to a boulder, literally from where I am to you, Linda. So close. And time slowed down, and I watched this whole thing, and I saw this black eagle bank off with the white victory sign on its back as it banked off with its prey. And it was at that moment that I thought, I want to chase this for the rest of my life. And that's when I really, really got into birding and got into my love of nature and wildlife. That's actually on the cover of the book, is that black eagle swooping in to take that unfortunate dassie. So I'm going to tell you a few stories from the book. It's from, really the book details my life as an African safari guide and birding guide in Africa, and ends off with our genesis of our TV show. But basically, I want to start off with one pretty crazy story. It took place in a wonderful place called Mahango Game Reserve, right at the top of Namibia, just above Botswana. And I had been a guide at a place called Pinda Private Game Reserve for a number of years, situated right here in northeastern South Africa. And after that, my fellow guide friend, a guy called Richard White, and myself started our own birding company, and it was called Honey Guides South Africa. And Richard was responsible for eastern Southern Africa, and I was responsible for western Southern Africa. And I had one particular guest who had been with me on 2 previous occasions. His name was Harold, and he was a British gentleman, and very, very nice, and he always wanted a private tour, so I used to take him privately on these trips. And he had seen 2,000 species of birds in Africa. Now that's more than I had seen, and still today is more than I've seen in Africa. To give you a perspective, there's only about 2,400 bird species on the continent. So he had seen just about all of them. But there was one species in particular that Harold wanted to see, and it's called a wattled crane. It's a stunning bird. It's the largest and tallest crane in Africa. Stands about 5 foot tall, so they're really big birds. There's only about 7,000 pairs of wattled cranes left in the world. One of the best places to see them is Mahango Game Reserve, right up there. But Mahango is not your typical African safari reserve, because it's very remote and it has no policing whatsoever. And strangely enough, for an African game reserve, there are very little rules. So in those days, as a guide or as a tourist, you were able to get out of your vehicle and walk around in a place where there are elephants and leopards and hippopotamus and everything else. So I remember it took us about 5 days to get up there, and we checked into the gate early morning, around sort of 8 a.m. in the morning, and I signed into the visitors book and was quite shocked to see that the last visitors into the reserve was like 4 or 5 days earlier. And so we knew that we were alone there, and it was very remote. So we drove along a little bit, and Mahanga is really beautiful. It's got a lot of thick woodland, but it's also got a massive floodplain of the Mahanga River. It's a huge floodplain, but it's where these cranes like to accumulate. And so we drove to the area where I knew they can be found, and got there, and I said to Harold, you stay in the car. I'm going to go out, walk through the fairly thick bush, down onto the floodplain, and then if I see the cranes there, I'm going to come back and call you. And Harold, in his British accent, "Oh, James, oh, jolly good, I shall remain right here." And I bid him farewell, and I got out the car, and I started walking down the path through about 150 yards of very thick bush along a little path. And immediately that unique smell of Africa after the rains permeated my nostrils. And those of you that have been to Africa before, especially after the rains, will know the smell I'm talking about. It's a sweet smell. It's unique. It's a mixture of dirt and grasses and herbs and animal dung, all mixed together. It's a very unique smell. And I just remember walking out there so happy, and walking down that path, I heard an African barred owlet calling in the tree, and I knew that was a nice species to show him, so I made a mental note. Carried on walking through this fairly dark, thick bush until I came out into the blinding light of the floodplain. And I walked out probably about 20 yards onto the floodplain, started looking around through my binoculars, and saw, to my immense joy, a flock of about 40 white-winged cranes, all feeding peacefully in the grass of the floodplain. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, this is awesome. Harold's British, but he might still give me a nice tip. This is a bird he really wants. So I'm about to turn around and go back up the path when the entire flock of 40 cranes takes off. And this is something that all of us that are birders will know happens a lot, right? Oh, did you see the bird? I just saw that bird. It's a super rare bird. And the moment they come, it's gone, right? Now you're the liar and you're the stringer, as we like to call it in birding circles. So I'm thinking, oh my goodness, and I'm watching through my binoculars as the entire flock flies all the way past, and I'm thinking, possibly they're going to land on the other side and we'll have another chance at them, but they disappear over the horizon. And I go back with my binoculars thinking, hey, maybe there's one or two that are remaining. And as I go to the position where they were, my heart stops. Because padding towards me, in the dew-bejeweled grasses of the Mahanga floodplain, is a large, black-maned African lion. And he looks at me, and I look at him, and he's about 200 yards away, so I'm thinking, okay, all right. And then he does this. Not a full roar, but terrifying nonetheless. And I start moving back, slowly, keeping my eye on him, and he moves forward. And then I stop, and he stops. Oh boy. So I start retreating further, and now getting back towards that thick bush. My training as a guide has always told me, be aware of your surroundings. Never turn your back on a cat that's approaching you, because that's the end of it. Always face the danger, but look around you from time to time. You don't want to walk back into an elephant or a buffalo behind you. And these are very, very strong possibilities in a place like Mahanga. So I'm looking around me, I'm moving back, and he's moving forward, and he's now closed the gap to around 160 yards. So he's gaining on me. And I look down, and I look around, and I see something on the path. Now I'm in this thick bush, surrounded by thorn trees, and I can see through the window of the path the male lion making a beeline straight towards me. But he's walking slowly and cautiously, and still every now and again. And I look down at the path, and my heart stops for a second time. Because over my fresh footprints from just minutes before are the unmistakable fresh tracks of more lions. Lionesses, to be precise. And I also happen to notice the tiny pug mark of a cub. And it dawns upon me instantaneously that I am in possibly one of the worst situations you want to be in the African bush. I'm trapped between a male lion whose responsibility it is to protect the pride, and a group of female lionesses with young cubs whose duty it is to protect their cubs. And so I've got two choices quickly in my mind, but these things happen as a guide, you act quickly. And I immediately know I've got two choices. I can walk back out on that path, confront the big boy on the floodplain, stare him down, chase him down, try to chase him off. Or I can try and take a circuitous route through the thick bush back to the car, avoiding the lionesses, which are probably close to the path. I decide on the latter, because the thought of facing down a 500-pound cat armed with nothing but a pair of Nikon binoculars makes me shiver to the bone. And so I start backing off into that thick bush. And those of you that have been to Africa, or even Texas, will know that trees in Africa are not the same as they are here in Florida. There's a tree called a buffalo thorn, the Sisyphus, which has, it's called in Afrikaans, a waggepiki doring, which means the wait a bit thorn tree. Because it's got two different types of thorns. It's got a rapier, forward-facing thorn that pierces your skin like a spear, and then it's got two very sharp, hooked thorns that are there to hold you and grab you. And of course, as I back off that path, and the male lion is now 100 yards from me, still coming. Now I'm caught up in a buffalo thorn, like a Christmas decoration, a Christmas tree, fresh buffet for the lions. And I have to rip out of it. And I rip out of that. And I've still got the scars on my back today. Good excuse for your wife, by the way. If you get scars on your back, scabs on your back, I was in Africa. I rip out of that, and I can feel the blood dripping down my shirt, all the way down my legs into my shoes. And as I get stuck a second time, the male lion's coming, I hear something terrible from right over here, very close to me. And I'm looking. Where's the sound coming from? I know what it is. And over here, 80 yards away. And then I see it, the unmistakable swish of a black tail tip, and then another, and then another, 20 feet from me, right over here, thick bush between us. Pent up, female aggression, like maternal jack-in-the-boxes, ready to pounce in a flurry of teeth, claws, and fur. And I get stuck second time on a bush. Now I'm looking that way. I have to focus on two different areas. And as I rip myself out of the second bush, the movement triggers a charge. And out of this bush, a lioness comes at me low to the ground, with her ears flattened back against her face. And I can see every crease in her face. And I'm saying, "Get away, leave me alone! Get away!" Screaming at her. And I actually run towards her, and I break her charge 3 feet from me, and she sprays me with mud and leaves and twigs, and then slinks back to where she came from. The male lion is just sitting there on his haunches watching all of this, trying to ascertain his next move. And as I move further back, she's joined by the other two lionesses, and all three of them come in unison, bobbing and weaving through the trees straight at me. And I scream at the one, "Get away! Hey! Hey!" And I break all of their charges, thankfully, again, right at my feet. Now the male lion. Male lions, as I said, their responsibility is to protect the pride, but they can be fairly cowardly sometimes. They like the females to do most of the work, including the hunting when they're around. And so I can see, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and I'm just sweating. I'm completely in shock. These lionesses are going to charge me again, I know it. And then he does the darndest thing. He looks at me, and I think he's going to run away. But he just bolts straight towards me down that path, rounds the corner, and comes in where I've come into the thick bush, running at me full tilt. And his black mane is just bouncing as he's running. And I shout him down. I run out of that bush into him, confront him, and literally this close to him, I scream at him, "Leave me alone!" Lion charge. This is what it looks like from a male lion. Oops. it's pretty terrifying, to say the least. Let's move on to something a little bit lighter, shall we? So I mentioned I worked for many years at a beautiful game reserve called Pinda Private Game Reserve, just below the border of Mozambique in northeastern South Africa. It's a wonderful place. I said to my wife, not if, but when I die, hopefully I've still got a couple more years, that's where I want my ashes scattered. It's the most beautiful place. It's where my formative years of guiding were made. It's a place where you can go and dive on the most southern coral reefs in Africa with whale sharks, leatherback turtles and dolphins in the morning, and then go and view elephants and rhinos and leopards in the same afternoon. So it's an incredibly special place with 7 distinct ecosystems in one area. And that makes it one of the best birding areas in the whole of Southern Africa. 450 species of birds, in fact now it's probably higher, closer to 470, have been recorded from that tiny little area where that star is. And while I was there, I was the resident bird guide at Pinda. And so whenever we got guests that were interested in birds, I was assigned to them. And we might know that most birders are not the most generous of people if you live on tips. Some are, I'm sure everybody in the room is. But for us guides, we wanted, those really rich Texans who were coming to see big game, who had deep pockets, right? So I was left at the bottom of the barrel. I was guiding South African birders and British birders and Australian birders. Do Australians and British and South Africans tip? Not really. So I was elated one day when a Texan birder showed up and said that he was looking for a bird guide. Of course, I'm thinking, fantastic. Love those Stetson hats. That means money for us as a guide. So I meet him, and we'll just call him Tex, because that's a good name for a Texan. And he says, I really want to see this particular bird. It's called a Narina trogon. And it's one of the most beautiful birds in Africa. It's not particularly rare, but it's very specific to certain habitats. And it's very difficult to see. Who's seen a trogon in this room? Oh, somebody. Okay. So you'll know what I'm talking about. Trogons are the same anywhere in the world. So they generally sit with their back to you, which is green and camouflaged. And they're very difficult to spot. So I said, Tex, I know just the place where they can be found. This is going back to the 1990s. So we had no iPhones with technology and calls and all that stuff. I used to have a tape recorder with the tape of the birds of Southern Africa. Now you can imagine sitting there with your guest, Narina trogon. What tape is it on? Oh yeah, it's on tape 17. So you'd go into your box, you'd pull out tape number 17, you'd put it in the tape recorder, and then you'd go, where's that call again? Somewhere in the middle. So you'd fast forward, play it, and out would come like an owl. And then you'd have to get it to the right place. It would take forever. So I was just like, no, I'm not doing this. So I used to practice mimicking bird calls. Because calling a bird, as we all know, is some of the best ways to view them, because they'll respond to that call. So we walk out in this magnificent cathedral sand forest with these tall balanites trees and labombo wattles and this white sandy soil. And I say, Tex, this is the perfect place. I've got a rifle this time, by the way. I say, Tex, this is the perfect place to try for the Narina trogon. And the call goes something like this. Let's see if it comes by. So it's this beautiful hooting call that ends off in a short rasping hoot. And I make the call, and sure enough, one answers from far in the distance in the forest, and I can hear it faintly. It's like, Tex, did you hear that? Yes, let's go closer. So I go not exactly where I thought I heard the call, but I go kind of halfway, because that's how we do it. You don't want to get up there and flush a bird, you want to lure it in over time. So we're going to take our time with this, and we get about halfway, and I make the call again. And now the bird calls, probably 50 yards away in the forest. We're close, but the forest is quite thick. So I say to Tex, I can just see this large termite mound in this opening glade in the forest. I say, let's get up to this termite mound and use it as cover. So we stalk up, walking very slowly to the termite mound, and then I make the call again. And it answers from right on the other side of that termite mound. And now we're super quiet. Tex, you step out, walk around the termite mound, and look that way, and look for a red breast, and you'll see the bird in the tree. He says, yeah, very good. And he says to me, by the way, you are the birding god. Thank you. And we walk out of that termite mound, around the corner, and there's Greg, my fellow guide, with one of his guests. And we spent the better part of an hour and a half calling our guests in. And he said the darndest thing to me. He said, James, even a blind dog can find a nut. But you guys are both blind and deaf. So I thought that was brilliant. But it does go to show that sometimes when we're in this field, we think we know it all, right? Oh, I know this, I'm such a good birder, I know everything. But nature's got this incredible way of bringing us all back down to size, doesn't it? So, this is an embarrassing story. Does anybody know what bird that is, by the way? It's a European bird. It's not an easy one, but I met my American wife, Rebecca. Gosh, when was it? I should know this. Is she here? 1999 in Fiji, when I was on a birding trip there. And in the early 2000s, we were in Cape Town, living in Cape Town, and I had honey guide South Africa with my friend Richard White, and he was over for dinner one night. And Rebecca was pregnant with our first child. She was 7 months pregnant, we had dinner, and Richard said to me, Jimbo, you're not going to believe this, but a European redstart has shown up in the Kalahari. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? I'm on 799 birds for Southern Africa. If I hit 800, I'm probably going to be one of the youngest, if not the youngest, birder in Southern Africa to hit that milestone of 800. I'm like, babe, can I go? She's like, well, how long are you going to be? I'm like, no, we're just going to go for the day. So we set off at 4 o'clock in the morning because what she didn't know was that Cape Town is over here, where our house was, and the redstart was seen in the Kalahari Desert of Botswana. So it's about 1,100 kilometers, somewhere around there. It's going to take us about 7 or 8 hours, if not more, probably 9. We left at 4 a.m. We got to the Kalahari at sometime in the afternoon, and we're thinking we're going to get the bird. It's been seen at Nosok Rest Camp, which is an area where everybody accumulates. It was seen yesterday, and it's been seen for 2 weeks. So of course we're going to find it, right? Of course. We get there in the afternoon, look for it around the rest camp, we look at the detailed information that was given to us. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Ask a couple of birds. No, it was here like 2 hours ago. Oh, must still be here. Let's just stay one extra night. And I reach out my old flip phone. You remember those old phones? iPhones weren't even around. And of course I open it up and there's no signal. Okay, it's fine, we'll come back tomorrow. So, we go birding the next morning, cannot find the bird. We bird the whole day, cannot find it. And I'm getting panicked. I'm like, Rebecca's going to kill me. So we bird that afternoon, nothing. The following morning, I stay now another morning, so it's like 2.5 days since I left my wife, who's 7 months pregnant. We bird that morning and I'm like, Richard, this is it, we have to go. We're out of here. So we get in my microbus and we start gunning it back to Cape Town because I want to get there by that night so I'm not in too much trouble. And of course, as we leave the reserve and we get back on the freeway and back into civilization, diddy, 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 diddy. Oh, my cell phone. Oh, flip, open it up, pull over. Oh, gee, that's 70 messages, missed calls, dozens, all from Rebecca. Whoops. Listen to the first call. Hi babe, just checking how you're going. I've got dinner ready for you. It's waiting in the fridge for when you guys come home. Hope you got the bird. Bye. Cool. Next phone call. Hey babe, I'm not feeling too well. You didn't come home last night. Where are you? Next call, now she's getting more and more irate. I'm listening to these voice messages, terrified. Next minute I think I'm going to labor. And where are you? And then the next message is, I'm going to hospital. My mother's driving me. You better get here now, ASAP. You're going to miss the birth of your first child. And I hear that message and I'm like, Richard, we have to gun it. And I start driving, I hate to say it, but record-breaking speed along this road, trying to get to that hospital. And I'm white-knuckling it. It's probably 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I can see my white knuckles on the steering wheel of that microbus, and I'm pushing it to the limit. And thankfully the roads on that stretch there's no cars, so you can just go, you can fly. And then it's total silence, because Richard's he's good friends with Rebecca as well, and he knows she can get, this is going to be bad. And then he says to me, Jimbo, you know what, we didn't get the red start. I know you're on 799, but I know a very good location right along this road for Slater's Lock. Are you mad? Do you know what's going on? No, freaking no, no way we're doing that. Carry on driving. I'm like, right side of the brain, I can hear Rebecca, the left side, I can hear Slater's Lock. Okay, Richard, we'll just pull in there quickly, because they come into these cattle troughs in the middle of the day. It's a very hard bird to see, very hard. And I know that this is my one chance to see it, because it's remote. And I say, okay, Richard, we'll just pull off. And he finds the location, and we pull off the side of this road. And I said, Richard, we're giving it 5 minutes. 3 hours later, a beautiful pair, in fact 3 or 4 Slater's larks fly into the water trough, and we get crippling views of these Slater's larks. And then I get back in the car and we gun it now back to Cape Town. I know I am in for it. I'm in so much trouble. And we get to the hospital, and thankfully they gave my wife these incredible drugs, which delayed the labor. And her mother still doesn't speak to me to this day. I've done a lot of dishes the days since then, a lot of babysitting, a lot of jewelry. But she was very dismayed when, after we got her out of hospital, I said, "Babe, you're not going to believe what I saw. I saw a Slater's lark. It's one of the most beautiful birds in the world." And she was horrified. And of course, I've been paying for it ever since. But thank you all very, very much. I want to just end by saying it's people like you that make a massive difference, because I like to believe that conservation starts in our own backyards. And the work that you're all doing for Ding Darling, just by visiting and exposing our kids to this, kids make a big difference. We're doing a lot of work with kids in China about elephants and ivory, by the way, and it's reaping massive success. So thank you all very much for coming. Thank you for listening, and it's been a pleasure being part of your community.